commission for a little while, so I thought that in order to kick off the conversation, we'll have him give a very brief overview of where we are with COVID and where we think we might be in the upcoming future, so that we can frame the discussion for commission. And similar to what we did last time when we were facing the expiration of these measures, what we will be doing is requesting the commission to either extend the measure, so to speak, to provide more time to allow these measures to take place, or end certain moratoriums or certain things like that. So we'll walk you through each question that we have. This has been a very collaborative effort with all of our departments, as well as folks from the DDA and the business community. So Chris, if you are on the line.
I am. Can you hear me?
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks. Sorry you can't see me. I assume you watch all the Facebook videos every time that Ted White interviews. Chris Bell, Emergency Manager. I'll go through these slides somewhat quickly for you. I think you've seen many of them or versions of them before. I think the title could be Cautious, Happy Optimism, I guess, for this kind of COVID update. So this slide, you've, I think, seen a version of this before. This is the curve of the epidemic in Florida early on, and when we had our first peak in July and August of 2020. You see that Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade counties really made up sometimes half to a little bit more than half, maybe 2/3 of the new cases. And as the pandemic went on, we became more proportional to the rest of the state. We appear to have had, again, thus far, our highest peak just after New Year's in the early days of January. And then we've had new cases decrease since then. Next slide, please. And thanks, Anthea, for moving the slides. The statewide, as of today, the 7-day rolling average, which is a better, as they go up and down every day, it's a better way to kind of see where we're at, is about 8,100 new cases a day. These are new people who have been diagnosed for the first time with a positive COVID test. As always, we assume that there are more people out there who have COVID on any given day, but this is how many people actually tested positive for the first time. Our death rate, our 7-day average, was actually 165 in the state, and today's was actually 232. Unfortunately, as we have seen each time during the pandemic, the deaths trail the spike in cases. And so while our new cases have started to come down since mid-January, our deaths have actually continued to increase. And as you know, those continue to accumulate over the days, weeks, and probably out to a couple months after the death occurs for all the lab results and the certification to verify. So about 1.8 million people in the state have been diagnosed with COVID, and almost 30,000 have died. Next slide. In Palm Beach County, our 7-day rolling average is 545 per day. Pardon me, with 15 deaths per day today. I think we had 22 deaths in Palm Beach County attributed, with a total of 111,000 so far and 2,300 deaths in Palm Beach County. Again, there may be more deaths than that, but these are the ones who've been, the death ticket has COVID-19 as a cause. We don't get deaths at the municipality or zip code or census tract level. We can only really get case counts. And so far in the city of Delray Beach, we've had 8,350 residents who have been positive for COVID. Next slide. Apologies for the top one being a little blurry, but this is a pandemic curve, one for the state on top, and two for the county on bottom. So you can see the county really has mimicked the state as we go on through the pandemic. Our numbers have really mirrored the shape of the curve. The thing I think I would just highlight here is that where we are right now, having 800 or so new cases a day, that's a lot better than the 1,200 and 1,500 cases we had in January. But we're still higher than probably 90% of the duration of this pandemic. We're still having more daily cases than the majority of the time since this began. Next slide, and we'll get to some of the optimism. So the first vaccination occurred in the United States on December 14th. Pfizer gave the first vaccine. About a week later, the Moderna vaccine became available. So we're really looking at just under 2 months of vaccination. And really, Florida didn't take off until some days after those were both announced. So this is as of today. 1.3 million Floridians have received a first dose. An additional 693,000 have received both doses of one or the other. For just over 2 million, or about 9% of our population, have had at least one dose. And of those, and this is encouraging, almost 1.5 million of them are 65 years old and older. In the county, we're pretty close to that as well. In the percentages, 133,000 first dose, 60,000 second have received two. So just under 200,000 in Palm Beach County have received at least one dose of the vaccine. That's 13% of our population, and that's the highest percent of population of any county in Florida. So we are vaccinating a lot of people, and 156,000 65 years and older have been vaccinated in Palm Beach County. Next slide. I think this one really helps to visualize the vaccination in Florida, and particularly the vaccination by age, because the governor's order really took off those last few days of December. And so you see those three lines rising sharply as we get into January. So we're looking at about a month and a half. The top of those curves, this is number of folks 65 to 74, 75 to 84, and 85 plus who have received at least one shot of the vaccine, and we're about 30 to 33%. If you look at who's gotten both shots, those numbers are in the 8 to 10% range for each of those ages. So this is great progress. This is about a month and a half of vaccination. We got about a third of our population 65 and older, partially at least, protected. The maybe cautious part of this is, if you extrapolate that out and we continue to vaccinate the 65 and older population at the same rate, then we're another month and a half. So we're at the end of March before we get 66%. And we're maybe in May by the time we get all the 65 and older who are willing to take the vaccine a first dose. So we're really into June, 28 days, 21 or 28 days later, before everybody 65 and older at our current rate get the vaccination. Everybody assumes, we don't know for sure, we haven't heard any governor's plans, but at some point before the absolute 100% of 65 and older vaccinated, we'll also see the vaccinations become available for those under 65. Next slide. Now, the cautious part, the predictions for the future, which of course are predictions and projections and based on modeling. The top chart here is from the CDC, and they built a consensus model of about 25 different university-based study groups, and they only project about 3 weeks out. They want to really hedge their bets and make sure that they're pretty confident in what it's going to look like. So they're going to project that the middle line there, the darker red, is kind of the consensus model. The new cases in Florida will remain about level to a slight decline over the next several weeks. The chart on the bottom is the more concerning one. This is a chart from the University of Washington's Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation. This is the one that we've referenced a lot of times in different documents, and a lot of people refer to. Their prediction is because of the new variants of COVID that are available, because universal wearing of masks is not currently happening in Florida. And because their projection is that as more people become vaccinated, they will become less likely to remain isolated, of course, and that will carry over to the general population. There'll be more kind of social activities. But they predict another spike in new cases in the April to early May timeframe. The middle of those three lines is their projection. The red is their worst case scenario. The top one, if everything went bad, and the green line at the bottom is the fictional, if all of a sudden tomorrow 95% of the population in Florida started to wear a mask all the time they're around anybody else. So those are what the projections say, what we know right now. I'm happy to take questions either now or at the end, or give you any information I have to help you consider your deliberations.
Jennifer?
So if the commission doesn't have any questions, what we can do is move on to the other portion of the presentation related to
had my hand up. I did have a question for Chris.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm blocking. Go ahead. Right ahead.
Sorry about that. Chris, thank you very much for your presentation. My question is this, and you may not know the answer. I don't know who knows the answer. I'm concerned with what I'm reading in the news about these variants, these other strains of the virus that in the paper I read yesterday seem to be particularly affecting us here in Palm Beach County, Broward, and Dade. Do you have any information about that?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Commissioner. The model that the University of Washington model incorporates a fairly high chance, because that's what they believe will happen, that the new variants, the two most commonly spoken about, are one from South Africa and one from Great Britain. Again, these didn't necessarily originate or mutate there, but that's just how they've been named. That those two are already found in Florida, that we have, I think, higher numbers of both of those variants than any other state at this point. And that their concern is that those are more easily spread, they're more easily communicated from one person to another. So that's built into their model, believing or projecting that we're going to have more transmission in the coming weeks and in the coming next couple months. The information, if I can extend a little bit farther, on efficacy of the current vaccines against those diseases, those variants, indicates that they're still very effective. And so right now we believe that the current vaccinations won't need tweaking. If anything, potentially down the road, if this becomes something that eventually people need boosters for, depending on how prevalent those become, then potentially need a booster sooner than later if those are the dominant forms that are circulating. But right now, we think they'll be protective, and yes, we think there's going to be quite a bit of that here.
Well, I really appreciate the explanation. You've done such a great job, as well as your colleagues, giving out the factual and scientific information that to me is so critical, and that explanation just really fit into that. So I thank you for the time, and again, I apologize for the interruption.
No, it wasn't no apology necessary. This is the perfect time to ask Mr. Bell of anything that you have concerns about. And as a matter of fact, I just want to, really emphasize to anybody who's watching, and especially my colleagues, look at the green line. I mean, if we were just following a mask mandate in the state of Florida, look where we would be in June of 2021, comparatively speaking, to where we could be otherwise. It just makes no sense to me that all this time we have not had a strict mask mandate across our state that is enforceable in the local government as well. It just doesn't make any sense that we're not doing that. And I think my colleague, Deputy Vice Mayor Shirley Johnson, who has been on this from the very get-go, can back me up on that one. The statistics are even saying it and suggesting it. Okay. I'm sorry, Deputy Vice Mayor, you got your hand up. Yep. Go right ahead.
Just say thank you for that plug. I feel like I've been very tenacious about it from the beginning. Makes no sense. And those of you who were watching the Super Bowl this weekend, after the quote-unquote victory, someone said that the governor was there without a mask, and the excuse was he was drinking beer. I didn't see him doing it, but I did see something that was so unsettling. Here we're talking about strains, we're talking about no mask, we're talking about the youth, and we're giving vaccines to the senior citizens, because I gather the youth just don't understand that they can die from this infection also. So I have no answer. It's all leadership, and I pray that since Delray seems to be leading the pack and COVID, spreads, I'm hoping that within the next 3 or 4 months that we are not at this point shaking our heads saying, why can't we all just wear a mask? Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Alvarez, at the very end of this, if you could just let us know if you heard anything back from the governor. I know we sent some requests in to ask if we could be, have home rule here to be able to do what we needed to do. And you can just give us an update on that. But go ahead and continue.
Okay, great. I think Anthea will now take over the rest as it's moving
Okay.
along, and we have all of our department directors obviously ready as well to discuss their appropriate pieces of this.
Okay. So we have, the city leadership has gotten together, and we have also Laura Simon from the DDA as part of this discussion, and she's available for questions as well. And we have just a series of guidance that we need on different topics related to temporary measures that we've taken in response to the virus. So the first is that at the last time that we discussed special events, city events were suspended until March 31st. However, the Green Market and the Old School Square concerts have resumed in some capacity. We have turned to start to look at how our neighboring municipalities are beginning to resume some amount of special events, and we wanted to discuss, are we going to allow some events to resume in a phased approach with new guidelines, or whether we are going to continue the moratorium. And so the types of safety permit restrictions that have been added that we could consider are having a limited access to our events, either through purchase tickets or reservations through a program like Eventbrite, limiting the event to a defined area. One of the things that we'd like to enact is a COVID team review of the CDC guidelines for any event that would want to come forward. And Chief Tomey and Chris Bell are available as is Sam Medtat to discuss kind of how that works in other places. And ultimately, if we do decide to start unrolling smaller events, do we want to in advance establish a threshold, whether it's related to a positivity rate increase or the number of ICU beds available, where we would kind of shut things back down again if it's going the wrong way. So there are a couple of things that have come up. A reimagined version of Savor the Avenue instead of a long table, isolated table separated by planters and a reservation and system. Is that something that we could discuss in mid-March? We've had inquiries for small outdoor activities, like a surf competition with about 30 attendees. And right now, the answer to all of this is no until March 31st. And so some guidance moving forward. Some of these events take quite a bit of time and setup. And is this something that we want to consider resuming in a phased approach, or do you want to continue the moratorium and establish a date to revisit, whether it's June 30th or something else? So that's the first topic we have that we would like some input and guidance from you on.
Okay, so Julie Cassell, you've got your hand up.